and welcome back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe Retrospective, taking a look at each film in the MCU and seeing how well they hold up. Last time we saw the cinematic debut of another classic comic book character with Doctor Strange, a trippy but magical adventure. Today we look at the sequel to Marvel's other famous team with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. With the first film being such a smash hit, a sequel was all but assured. James Gunn was back to write and direct, with only him working on the screenplay this time. Now that the characters were introduced and became a family, Gunn wanted to explore them being a family and let them grow. He also decided to touch more on Peter Quill's origin and his relationship with his father, which was different from the comics. Marvel wanted to use the character Ego, a celestial being, in the film. To do that, they had to reach an agreement with Fox, who owned the film rights to him. They compromised by allowing Fox to change up the powers for Negasonic Teenage Warhead, who appeared in the Deadpool films. Fox then handed Ego back to them, and they were free to do what they wanted with him. In addition to the current roster of Guardians, Gunn wanted to expand the team a bit by introducing new characters like Mantis and Adam Warlock. The latter was chosen to appear in the third film instead, which was in the early stages of development. Marvel wanted to avoid repeating incidents like Iron Man 2 and Avengers Age of Ultron, where the constant interference from executives got in the way of the director's vision and resulted in a mixed final edit. Thankfully, they allowed Gunn to essentially have complete creative control over the story and characters. Some pieces were laid to set up their crossover with the Avengers, but this was still a standalone film separate from the rest of the MCU. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 premiered in 2017, became one of the highest-grossing films of the year, and made even more than its predecessor. Critical reception was very positive, though there was some debate on which film people preferred. With the team's dynamic really shaking up in its upcoming installment, does the Guardians' second journey still stand tall? Let's take a look. The film opens much like the last one, with a flashback to 1980, when Peter's mother, Meredith, fell in love with his father, played by Kurt Russell. Russell is de-aged to maintain his look in this decade, and again, they pull it off perfectly. He shows Meredith a plant he rooted on Earth, and plans to have one on every planet in the universe, though she really doesn't get it. I should take this time to note that Peter's parents are great together. They feel like a believable couple. We cut to the present, where the Guardians are protecting a MacGuffin from a giant squid-like creature, as they were hired to do by the Sovereign, an enigmatic people who reside on the planet. This opening fight reinforces two vital elements from the first film: the dynamic between the team and the unique music style. It's no secret that Mr. Blue Sky playing over the credits was so iconic that it became a meme. Also, we see Baby Groot for the first time. I won't mention every time we see him being adorable, but trust me, he is. After defeating the creature, they go to the Sovereign leader, Aisha, played by Elizabeth Debicki, to collect their payment. The Sovereigns see themselves as pure creatures above all others, which makes them extremely pretentious. They give the Guardians Nebula, who tried to steal the MacGuffin. The team makes course for Xandar to hand Nebula over, but the Sovereign fleet attacks them after realizing Rocket stole their MacGuffin to be a dick. I love that the fleet is remotely piloted, which makes them look like they're playing an arcade game. The Guardians try to fend off the fleet, but Peter and Rocket fight over being pilot. Thankfully, they are saved by an unknown figure who destroys the fleet in one fell swoop. They crash land on Burhurt, a forest planet. Gamora berates Peter and Rocket for their arrogance, and Peter argues with Rocket over stealing the MacGuffin. They go to fight, but the figure arrives and reveals himself as Ego, Peter's father. Meanwhile, on the planet Contraxia, which I swear sounds like a space STD, Yondu's faction of the Ravagers runs into the other faction's leader, Stakar, played by Sylvester Stallone. It's revealed that Yondu and his men were exiled after the others learned that he dealt with child trafficking, which is how he found Peter. He betrayed the code and will not be honored as a Ravager upon his death. As Stakar leaves, Aisha and her people approach Yondu with a proposition of capturing the Guardians. Speaking of, Ego tells Peter that he hired Yondu to get him after his mother died. He instead kept Peter, explaining that his small stature as a child made him perfect for fitting into places others couldn't. Ego invites the group to his home, but Peter is unsure if he can trust him. Gamora tries to reassure him by remarking on what he told her about his childhood. Since he had no father figure growing up, he made his own with David Hasselhoff. Yes, literally David Hasselhoff. He exists in the MCU as himself. The point is, Gamora thinks this could be his chance to actually have his father in his life. The team decides to split. Peter, Gamora, and Drax leave with Ego, while Rocket and Groot stay behind to fix the ship and watch over Nebula. Here, we see the team in a separation similar to the Avengers, with Peter and Rocket's disagreements at the center. As they set off for Ego's world, we meet his assistant Mantis, played by Palm Clemente. She's an empath who feels someone's emotions by touching them. She's also socially awkward, which makes her work well with Drax. Yondu and the Ravagers capture Rocket and Groot, but he wants to sell the MacGuffin on the black market. This upsets his crew, including Taserface, and yes, that is his name, played by Chris Sullivan. Kraglin also remarks how soft he is on Peter, leading to a mutiny with the help of Nebula, who grew freed out of fear. Meanwhile, the others arrive on Ego's planet, which is his actual body. As a Celestial, he was born without a corporeal form, but made his own, which is how he reproduced. He exposits that his goal was to seek out other life, which is how he met Meredith. Back with the Ravagers, the mutineers kill all of Yondu's loyalists, imprison him in a rocket, and torture Groot, while Nebula takes a ship to find Gamora. We get more of her backstory here. Growing up, Thanos had the two fight each other, and Gamora always won. With each failure, he had a part of Nebula replaced with machinery, making her mostly cybernetic now. Ego teaches Peter about his powers as he is half celestial, and the two bond. Mantis and Drax also bond, where she alludes to a dark secret. Groot and Kraglin help break Yondu and Rocket out, and Yondu uses his magic arrow with his fin to take out the crew. This is one of the best scenes, and not just because of the song, but also seeing how much Yondu and Rocket have in common. They rig the ship to blow as they make their escape, but not before Taserface contacts the Sovereign and gives them their coordinates. They do lightspeed jump to Ego, leading to a very trippy space scene. On Ego, Gamora is suspicious of his true nature, but Peter is wrapped up in his family lineage. He also wants to act on what he calls an unspoken thing between him and Gamora, but she deflects, feeling betrayed by Peter because he has seemed to abandon his self-made family for the one he came from. She blows off some steam where Nebula finds and attacks her. In the heat of their battle, she reveals she just wanted a sister and resented her for beating her in every fight. Ego tries to comfort Peter by telling him he is meant for a higher purpose. He reveals his true plan, the expansion. The plant at the beginning is one of many and is his actual seed. His plan is to use them to possess every form of existence, turning everything into him. Kind of reminds me of that episode of Doctor Who where the Master turned everyone into him. Ego also drops a major bombshell by telling Peter he planted the tumor in Meredith's brain because she was a distraction. This rightfully upsets Peter, who now sees through his facade. The others make it to the planet, where we get possibly the most important Stan Lee cameo. Here he is shown as a Watcher informant. The Watchers in the comics were beings that existed outside the universe and watched over the timelines. Because Stan had cameos not just in the MCU, but other Marvel films as well, a popular fan theory was that he was always playing the same character in each movie, either as a Watcher or someone working for them. This was a fantastic way to prove the fans right. That being said, this also has a minor continuity issue. Stan mentions he worked as a FedEx guy, which alluded to his cameo in Captain America Civil War. However, this movie takes place only a few months after the first one, which happened a couple years before Civil War. However, this is one I feel can be easily explained. With the recent appearance of a Watcher in What If, we know that time is relative to them, so it's possible they picked up Stan sometime after Civil War and took him to their dimension, which Yondu and the others just so happened to pass through. But I digress. As they land, Yondu and Rocket argue with each other and realize that their lives are the same. They resolve to save Peter out of love, but won't admit it. They work with Gamora, Drax, Mantis, and Nebula to destroy Ego's physical form, leading to the climax where they fight the entire planet. This is bigger and better than the first film's climax. There are so many great moments. Yondu calling himself Mary Poppins, Peter turning into a giant Pac-Man, and my personal favorite, Rocket and Groot unarming the bomb to destroy Ego. The Sovereign also show up, but are wiped out again. Peter fights off Ego using his heart to tap into his powers. Yondu stays behind to help save Peter while the others go to leave, fearing he will die. In a final plead, Ego tells Peter that if he dies, his power will disappear forever. Peter accepts this as he'll finally be normal. The planet implodes as Ego perishes. Yondu sacrifices himself to rescue Peter, finally admitting his own fatherly love for him. The team holds a funeral for him, where Peter acknowledges his own love for Yondu, seeing him as his true dad. Some have commented this felt out of character for Yondu, given his attitude towards Peter in the first film. However, I feel it fits. I don't know if this was what Gunn had in mind from the beginning, but I see allusions to it in Volume 1, so I don't think it's out of place. Gamora and Nebula also admit their love as sisters, though Nebula leaves determined to kill Thanos. I like that we never actually saw him in this movie. It worked fine in the first film, but it would have felt tacked on if he was in here. Kraglin gives Peter a Zune, replacing the Walkman Ego destroyed. Peter acknowledges his own responsibility as a father to Groot, and the other Ravager factions show up and actually give Yondu a proper funeral. Having heard of his heroism and sacrifice redeemed him in their eyes. Gamora finally accepts the unspoken thing, and Mantis is made a full member of the team as the movie ends. From here, we get a bunch of scenes in between the credits. One shows Kraglin using Yondu's arrow, teasing his larger presence with the Guardians. Another has Takar reuniting with his original Ravager team that Yondu was a part of. Each member was a part of the OG Guardians team in the comics. Michael Rosenbaum appeared as Martinex, Vig Rhames as Charlie-27, and Michelle Yeoh played Alita. Miley Cyrus even makes a cameo as Mainframe, which is just insane. I hope we do get to see more of them in the future. In our third scene, we see Aisha finishing her creation of Adam Warlock, setting up his appearance in the next movie. The fourth scene shows teenage Groot catching the team up with the Avengers timeline. The final scene has the Watchers abandoning Stan, which makes me wonder how he made it out, if ever. Maybe this was chronologically his last moment, which would be kinda sad. But after all that, the second volume of the Guardians story is complete. I wasn't sure if I liked this one more than Volume 1 when I first watched it, but now I can firmly say I feel is precisely on par with the original. Both had their pros and cons. The first had a bit more edge to it, but the second had better emotional moments. If I had to pick, I'd choose this one for how it leaves you. Sad, but wanting more. As the Guardians ramped up for their eventual crossover, one of Marvel's most popular heroes would finally get a feature within the MCU. Join me next time when we look at Spider-Man Homecoming, and see just how well the friendly neighborhood web-slinger works in an already established universe. Until then, if you want to keep up with my videos, then be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and check out my VODs on my other channel. If you enjoyed the video, then feel free to leave a like and share with friends. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.